Hello everyone. In this episode, I will be talking about save points in PostgreSQL. So far, we know that transaction can be committed, which saves all of the changes, or it can be rolled back, which throws away all the changes. Let's see that. First, we start a transaction. Then we execute several SQL statements. We insert the label 1. We delete the label 1. Then we insert label 3 and label 4. And say after that we roll back a transaction. What it does is that all the changes that we did in a transaction, meaning all the changes caused by those SQL statements, is now gone. And we can verify that if we query the labels table now, we see that count is 0. So nothing was changed. In other words, the entire transaction was rolled back. But we already know that. What we don't know yet is that there is a way we can roll back just parts of a transaction. So rollback statement, just to repeat ourselves, rolls back the entire transaction. Now let's move to the second slide and see how we can roll back just a part of a transaction. So we start another transaction, then we execute for the same SQL statements. So we insert the label 1, okay, then we delete that label 1, then we insert label 3, and then we insert label 4. Now, question is, how we can roll back just a part of this transaction? Let's say we want to roll back statement 2 and statement 3. So those statements we want to roll back. How is it possible? Well, we're gonna need two things. So first, we're gonna need to create a save point. And the way we do it is with a save point SQL statement. We need to give it a name also, right? So in this case, the name gonna be sp1. You can define as many statements, as many save points as you want, right? So here we just have now, we just have 1, and it's called sp1. Now, what we can do is that at a later point, we can roll back to that save point, okay? And let's try to understand what it does. When you roll back to a save point, what it does is that every SQL statement that was executed in between the definition of the save point, which in this case is save point sp1 statement, and rollback statement, which rolls back to the save point. So everything in between these two SQL statements will be cancelled, will be thrown away, right? So if in the previous example with the rollback, we rolled back all of the statements, now with the save point, we can roll back just a part of it, right? So a save point, let's spend a bit more time understanding what a save point really is, right? In a transaction, all the statements execute one by one, right? So here in this case, this is the first statement, then we have a second statement, third statement, fourth statement. The save point is really like a marker, okay? So you will leave this marker after or before some SQL statements. In this case, we left a marker here after the first statement. And the way we can use that marker is that at a later point, as you saw already, you can roll back to that place, right? Meaning everything that happened after the definition of that save point and before the rollback, in this case, first delete and then insert, now they are gone, okay? Nothing is affected outside of these boundaries. So statements before the save point definition, in this case this one, and statements executed after the rollback, in this case we have one statement here, they are not touched. They stay intact, okay? Now we can verify that if we query the labels table, we see that there we have label 1 and label 4. So let's try to analyze that. So first we insert the label 1, right? Then we delete that label 1, okay? So after the delete, we still see that label 1 in the labels table. Why? Because this delete statement was cancelled. We rolled back that, right? So if you roll back a delete, then you are left with just an insert statement, right? So we see the result of that. We also don't see the label 3 in our table. Why? Because we also cancelled the insert statement that inserted label 3. And we see a label 4 there. Why? Because it was executed after the rollback, and as we said, everything that's executed before the save point and after the rollback is left untouched. And that's what we see here. Okay, so that is the idea of the save points. One thing to mention is that just because you defined a save point, it doesn't mean that you have to roll back to it. Okay, you can define as many save points as you want and never roll back to it. Okay, so there is no limit to define, let's say, only 5 save points or so. Okay, next we're going to talk about an optimization, and this optimization comes from the fact that whenever you define a save point, it is a resource-intensive task. So PostgreSQL needs to do work. We are not going to go into detail what work, but it is a resource-intensive. So it's not free. It is an expensive operation to define a save point. So you should really use save points sparingly, only when you need it. But let's say you define the save point, right? And at a later point, you realize that I no longer need it. Okay, so maybe you were expecting some result, right? So let's say here you execute a label 3, and now you know that you no longer need to roll back to the save point. What you can do is you can release, you can remove the save point, right? And that's done with a release save point command, release save point SQL statement, right? So what it does is that it removes the save point. So there is no more save point called sp1. Okay, and the reason why to do that is that, as we said, maintaining a save point is a resource-intensive operation for PostgreSQL. So first rule is that use it sparingly, and second rule is that whenever you don't need a save point, release it. Okay. One thing to mention is that when you commit a transaction or roll back a transaction, when transaction is completed, all the save points are also gone. So it's not like before you commit a rollback, you have to manually release a save point. That's not the case. But while your transaction is ongoing and you know that the save point that you created will no longer be necessary, you can release it. Okay. And after that, if we, let's say, try to roll back to the save point, you're going to get an error. Why? Because we just released it. We removed it. Okay. So that was all I wanted to share about save points. In the next episode, we will be talking about time, how time works in a transaction. So for now, thanks for watching and hope to see you in the next one.